Trade and Industry Minister Park Stao and his Chinese counterpart Wang Wentao have signed a framework agreement on economic partnership for shared prosperity. Dao is leading the South African delegation in Beijing for the Joint Economic Trade Commission alongside Wentao. The engagement centres on strengthening bilateral trade ties and advancing a deeper economic cooperation between South Africa and China. This landmark agreement will be followed by negotiation and conclusion of an early harvest agreement by the end of March 2026, which will then see China provide duty-free access to South African exported products and will enhance Chinese investments into South Africa.
It's a very lucrative offer for South African business that seeks to do trade with the Chinese government. Out of this agreement, we're now working on implementation measures, and those implementation measures would include early harvest initiatives. So what are the first set of products that we can get into the Chinese market? They include investment in industrialization in South Africa. They include agreements on standards and regulations so as to facilitate ease of access into the Chinese market and investment in South Africa. But they also include opportunities for South African companies that wish to establish base in China.
And for more clarity now on the partnership, we are now joined by Farai Ian Muvuti. He's the CEO at the Southern African Times, and he joins us now via our video link. Mr. Muvuti, thank you so much for your time this evening here in SABC News. I mean, let's start off here. Many have hailed this as a major milestone when it comes to trade between the two countries. Maybe let's start off here. What does this trade deal entail for both nations?
Well, thank you yet again for having me. I think the critical point that the trade deal contains, especially as it relates to South African business, is an increment of import. So if you look at your agricultural sector, for instance, if you look at the numbers there, currently South Africa's export in terms of its performance in China, in the Chinese market, is less than 0.5%. This creates opportunity. So, and we're talking in monetary terms, that's about $1 billion annually. Now, this grants access to greater opportunities because part of the limitations were around standards and issues relating to tariffs, whereas this particular regime allows a particular selected product that enables players within the agricultural sector, for instance, the wine sector, as a critical example, to widen up their margins, especially in light of the geopolitical tensions that are currently happening. South Africa has looked east as a diversification aspect of their market play, and which plays critically to the potential of future employment. So in terms of what it entails, it starts off, of course, as just purely a framework, a political framework that simply suggests that in the future, this is what we're going to discuss. And then, of course, as you mentioned earlier, the early March negotiations will then look into the detail of this deal, which then quickly categorizes what areas, be it in the mobility sector or the mining sector, or as well as the agricultural sector, what products are going to be on that free access market point. And then, of course, the tariff regime will be reduced, given the fact that there will be a clear negotiation. And China sees this as a template for the entirety of the continent. So South Africa plays a pivotal role in leadership in that regard.
And I mean, you touch on the issue of geopolitics, and this deal comes at a time where the US has increased tariffs not only for South Africa, but for many African countries. But zooming into South Africa, what does this mean for South African products in particular?
Well, I think, as I had mentioned, with the lowering of tariffs, it means that South Africa can actually begin to look at a more diverse network. So, for example, if you look at the current regime with AGOA still retains a lot of the percentiles when it comes to, well, apart from certain products within the South African agricultural sector. But when you look at the markup of the tariff regime within the US itself, it's looking at a 3% addition to the already pre-existing 30%. So those products that are exempt simply have a 3% reduction. But with China, we can see a greater percentile because China will seek to evidence that it is a better partner. It's stable, it's consistent, it also is scalable. With that scale means greater requirement, and greater demand means greater seeking for financing to scale up production, be it in mining areas or be it in mobility, in manufacturing sector, or be it in agriculture and looking at agricultural processing. And part of what that deal entails is value addition, which advantages South Africa when it comes to its potential for job employment. So there's a lot of stuff in the deal that are advantage South Africa. However, the results are not going to be instantaneous. It will take a number of. It appears that it will be gradual, but that gradual prospect will simply look at liberalization of the market, but more fundamentally, value addition within the ecosystem of the South African economy, and that will equally influence the industrialization policy of South Africa. So you're looking at capacitation for your own industrial policy.
And I mean, Mr. Muvuti, you touch on the different sectors, right? The agricultural sector, the automobile sector, as well as manufacturing. But which sectors in South Africa will immediately feel the impact of this trade agreement?
Definitely agriculture. Agriculture is definitely one of the immediate beneficiaries of this particular policy. Your automobile industry will equally benefit quite immediately, I think. And when we talk about immediacy, remember, in agriculture, we're not looking at just one product. You're looking at a multitude of products. And I think quite a number of products will be listed. China, I'll give an example. China is a strong, one of the largest importers in the world. Currently, in terms of the global market, in terms of agricultural produce, they probably occupy below 9, I think it's 9 to 10% of global agricultural produce, total budget of about 200 billion annually when it comes to imports of agricultural products alone. South Africa gets to be in the play of that. South Africa currently plays at $1 billion. If South Africa can scale up because of this negotiation, the agriculture industry will be a net benefactor as a consequence. And agriculture, historically and in African context, is actually an economic lever. When your agricultural sector does well, especially when it comes to scale, it means that it feeds into other sectors of the economy to create employment. So I think, basing it on alone, and I think one person to read it, I think it's Andile Sihlobo, who writes extensively about this, and I read him ferociously when it comes to agricultural expertise. And I think his data is actually correct, right on the money. So I'll look at agriculture, I'll look at your auto industry, and I'll equally look at your mining industry. But one of the good things about this particular agreement, it protects the steel industry. It actually looks at it from a beneficiation project. And if you look at what has happened with the ArcelorMittal, the closing of ArcelorMittal and the diversification of Anglo-America when it comes to its steel industry, these create advantages for capacitation.
And Mr. Muvuti, before I let you go, I mean, just talking about these sectors, and you would remember the impact when those US tariffs were imposed on South African goods and how that has impacted the South African market in particular. When it comes to the recovery of the South African market, will they be able to recover now with this new deal?
Absolutely. So the way markets tend to react is markets react on the basis of projection. And purely because of this deal alone, the market perception of South Africa has shifted because South Africa is beginning to look east. And you notice that South Africa is not alone on this. Canada is doing the same. Quite a number of, just last week, Keir Starmer was in South Africa. I mean China. And part of that is a broader strategy of looking east because China demonstrates that it's a stable market and it's predictable. And they will not be the sort of like geopolitical shifts in terms of thought or change of leadership as a consequence and creating some sort of myopic policies as we're seeing in the US. So this is a good place for South Africa because it's broadening its horizon. And remember, it won't stop here. It won't stop with China. It will look at India. It will look at greater networks within the global south, which further expands South Africa's market. So because of that market perception shift, investment indeed will be created. And any investment perceptions that are negative on South Africa will be looked at differently today.
Mr. Muvuti, thank you so much for your time. Really grateful for your contributions. That's Farai Ian Muvuti. He's the CEO at the Southern African Times. And you would have heard him there speak about Wandile Sihlobo. He'll be joining us in the next hour to talk more about the trade agreement between South Africa and China.